So 3, 2, 1. So hello and good evening, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. We are here as well doing this webinar, actually scattered all over the world. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Gabriele Romagnoli from Tuori, and today actually we wanted to do something a bit different. Usually we get guests to come over and tell about their designs and their journey and how they've created their own spatial experiences. But today we have something different, because as soon as I got actually in contact with Susan, I was like blown away by the scope of what they've been trying to achieve actually over the past year. And so it is really a pleasure that I would like to guys to introduce you to Rob and Susan, basically working on this tremendous project that they're gonna tell us today much more about. So Susan, Rob, thank you very much for joining.
Thank you.
It is really
Thanks,
a pleasure.
Gabriel.
Look, why don't you start maybe just telling us a little bit about you, and maybe for the people that are now live, don't hesitate always to ask questions and type them in. So please go ahead. And so maybe we start with Susan. Why don't you tell us a little bit about you?
Hi, Gabriella. Thank you so much for inviting us today. We're super excited to share about our work and hopefully get some interest around the project. So I'm a UX designer, and I've been a UX designer for the past 13 years. I have sort of a combination tech and design background, and I've done a lot of things from front-end engineering to brand design and web development. But I started my career as a visual effects animator in the motion picture industry here in Los Angeles. So working in VR has been really a lot of fun to kind of go back into production and making things and creating in 3D. So super excited to share about our research. And Rob?
Yeah, thanks, Susan. Thanks, Gabriele, for having us. My name's Rob Dongus. I'm based down in Sydney, Australia, where I'm a PhD research student at the University of Sydney. My research is exploring how to use VR for language learning, and then more generally, how to apply the design principles to immersive environments for education. But before that, I have a background in IT, then that translated through to web design, and then I finally learned about immersive environments and game design and really went full in on the 3D world. So yeah, pleasure to be here and really excited to talk about our research as well.
I think it's fantastic also because there are a lot of this really looks like the profile in a way of basically the people that usually are enthusiasts and excited about in general the world of design, and some of the people that really we want to speak to. So now we mentioned that you guys are basically one of the most ambitious project in UX research for VR, right? That's one of the things, because that I think it's a very good description of what you guys are basically. So why don't you maybe tell us about that? So what is actually the mission? What is Veil actually trying to accomplish? Maybe Susan, why don't you start with that?
So the concept of this project started between Rob and I. We were both passionate about VR, both passionate about UX, and we came together through another professional organization, and we wanted to do some research, and we talked about a lot of different things, and then we ended up with, well, let's look at the landscape of VR and categorize interaction patterns. And really, it was more for our own educational purposes than anything at that time. We just really wanted to learn as much as we could about different interaction patterns in VR.
And then it kind of exploded, basically.
What happened? From there.
What happened?
We'll talk about all of that, yeah.
How did that happen, and basically what was the step from saying, hey, because there are, I believe, a lot of people that are trying to gather that knowledge, right? Sometimes they gather from maybe some articles, they look at YouTube videos, and then and they kind of like create their own database. You guys instead are saying, okay, that's not enough. We want to do something that is huge, and not just the two of us, but we're gonna need so many people to do it, right? Because that's of course one of the other challenges. Maybe Rob, why don't you tell us about that? What was the transition that moves to be two people excited about UX for VR to being like a complete team creating this massive?
I just want to say one thing. Rob and I never said, let's do something really huge.
Now you are here.
Yeah, we still can't help it. But a great question. We started off with this idea and it really expanded into this broad landscape analysis of UX and interaction design within VR. So as we started to develop the study and the protocol, we realized that we would need more people, and we put out a call for volunteers, and we were just amazed at the return in response that we got from people that were interested in acquiring that same knowledge. I think it's really important to think about it from first principles, from the idea that we're not doing this all as secondary research. We really want to get in, use the experiences, be inside VR to uncover some of these design patterns that exist there. And so the kind of people that we've got on board the team ranges everywhere from UX researchers to data analysts, VR developers, even clinical psychologists have come on because they're all seeking that same kind of knowledge of how can we understand the design of VR experiences, and then eventually how can we leverage that in our own experiences that we all want to eventually create in this expanding world of XR.
And of course, with great power, with great numbers, there are great responsibility and kind of like complication as well, right? So that is one of the things that we're certainly going to touch upon. But maybe still again for Rob, why don't you kind of like tell a bit the logic? So the logic was behind this task, right? So this kind of like, no, in general, this study, I would say, right? So, okay, we want to do this. Now, how do we do it? What is the approach that you guys started approaching? And then we are going into basically together maybe with the audience that are listening to go through this process that and kind of like how do they tackle the challenge of collecting such heterogeneous sets of data with people that are scattered all over the world in order to create those design patterns that are going to be useful for others. So this is a bit one of the mission that some of the knowledge that we would like to transfer also to the people that are listening and that will listen in the future. In general is, so what are the recommendations that you will be able to get from building such an extensive study? Right, and I believe that some of this knowledge can certainly be applied then also to kind of like smaller scope, right, or maybe smaller teams. So that is absolutely. So, Rob, what was the logic behind the study?
Yeah, so since the beginning, we've lived in this dichotomy of academia and practice, and that kind of stems from my background in the academic world and Susan's strong background and experience in the practical consumer market. But knowing that we were always kind of pulling on those two strings, we needed to find a study that would both satisfy the scientific rigor of the academic world, but then also be really applicable for people, for consumers, for developers and producers of this kind of content. So there's always been these two sides to the coin. And as such, the study reflects that dichotomy. And we've got the academic portion, which is I guess you'd call it a mixed methods, quantitative and qualitative evaluation. So that's the broad academic term, but then in practicality, it really just translates to this landscape analysis where we're cataloging design patterns and building a framework for evaluation that can really be applied to any VR title across the market.
Okay.
So to dig, yeah, sure.
No, please. I didn't mean to cut. Go ahead.
Yeah, so to just dig down a little bit further into how that translates to the methodology, it really relies on, firstly, a background of strong research and information that we're building upon. I mean, we're not rebuilding the wheel here. There's a lot of pre-validated studies and methods and tools out there that we can use. So we've looked at a lot of those, all the way from presence questionnaires to embodiment frameworks that have been set up by people at Microsoft. And we've included those within the evaluation. Then we've translated some aspects like heuristic evaluations, where they can normally be used in traditional design interfaces. We've translated those over into VR to be more applicable. And then we've also got the more qualitative element, which is really asking our evaluators, how does the experience make you feel? What's the physiological and psychological response that you have within that virtual world? All of these aspects that we pull out so that we can eventually have this huge data set, a really comprehensive understanding of that experience. Because we know that VR is such a complex technology, we need to have all of these different viewpoints in the technology to really understand it. So that's where we're heading with the methodology.
And I think Garrett just said the sentence of the evening. So this effectively creates a standard to measure against going forward. This will be very meaningful. Exactly. And that is exactly what we are after. So Garrett, thanks. We could leave. Bye. No, but absolutely, yes. So thanks, Rob. And so then the question is, and how does talking back about that dichotomy between the academic part of it and then the applicability. So how does that gonna evolve into that? Right. So once all that is packed, categorized, and analyzed, that we're gonna discuss about that also. What's gonna be the outcome? How, as a designer, many of the people that are here probably listening today, what they would get, how they could actually, how they could make best use of it.
Yeah, so there's a few sources, and I'll talk a little bit about some of the pattern library, and then maybe Susan, you want to tackle some of the potential publishing avenues that we've talked about. But one big output that we'd like to generate is a very clear online repository of design patterns within VR. And we've started to realize that design patterns, where in traditional interface design just covers small numbers of interactions in a very constrained environment, design pattern in an immersive context really means much more than that. It includes the user's behavioral and cognitive states. It includes the environment, any ambient effects within that environment, and then it includes the interactions and interfaces that lie on top of that.
Yeah.
So by building this really big picture of each individual pattern and then making that available, it means that designers can really pick and choose the best cases for themselves for their specific needs.
Yeah. Susan, you wanted to add something on this?
Yeah, so the primary purpose of the research and where we started was wanting to build a pattern library for interactions. But as Rob has alluded to, there's a lot of other data that we're collecting to make the study more meaningful. And we actually spent quite a lot of time building the survey itself. We call it the survey, the questions that are being asked. And it was quite a rigorous process in terms of, we did a lot of secondary research and then we brought that all together. And so some of the deliverables besides just the pattern library will be, we're doing a summary of each title. So there'll be like this really nice catalog of all the titles with a summary of all the data that we collected across the different areas, not just the interaction patterns. We've already built, so the test itself is the framework that we've designed is something that we'll publish, that other people will be able to use. And then also just certain things we've done, like we have a knowledge base that we're building for the meaning of all of the questions, so that everybody on the team has the same understanding. So we have this knowledge base that's like a huge glossary of VR and interaction design pattern terms, and then we'll publish that as well at the end. So and who knows what else we'll figure out along the way, but right now those are and then people have asked, will you make the data public? Because just the data set alone would be really valuable too for other researchers. So
yeah. Look, we have Okay, let me get first to a comment. I want to, and actually this is fascinating. Like, I mean, just the opportunity to have kind of like your own title being compared with the one of others and be analyzed in this way. I think that there is just value in that. So this is just the first time I'm gonna say it, and also, but I'm gonna repeat it, and probably also Susan as well. Now this is the moment that basically Veil is looking for content contributors. So that means people that would contribute with their own title in order to be part of this study and technically be part of design history, right? VR design history. So I think that this would be actually the first opportunity for anybody that is the people that watching this to actually consider to be part of this, because you're gonna get your own report and be part of this. So absolutely, you can directly go on the website and start applying now. We do have a question from Mohammed, and we're gonna skip through because actually we would love the questions of the people more than my own. So a question for Rob: how did you deal with different VR technology and platform while doing primary research?
Great question, and something that we've definitely struggled with. So one of the limitations that we put on ourselves at the beginning was to only look at 6 degree of freedom headsets. That was a decision that we made to ensure a consistency for one, but then also just complexity within the interactions that we were exploring. So making decisions like those along the way will help you when you're doing this kind of research. Another decision that we made was to only look at kind of the top 3 tiers of headsets. So looking at Windows Mixed Reality, Vive, and the Oculus ecosystems. That allows us to manage headset allocations and resources with all of our volunteers around the world. So there's a logistical element that you need to apply sometimes. There's these constraints that you can put on yourself, but by limiting that, we're actually expanding the ability for us to do valid and credible research.
Okay. Yeah, we wanted to be able to compare, and so have those consistency. That's why, like, we talked about mixed reality, and we said, well, we can't do that because it's going to be too complicated to compare the titles across the same data sets. And then we also wanted to make sure that participants in the study on the team would have access to the headsets. So that was another reason why we limited to, like the 3 major headsets.
Yeah. But there is also, and this kind of like is a good bridge to the question that Robert asked: is AR 100% out of scope, or will you include it into the research?
Include what into the research?
AR, augmented reality.
No, we're made the decision not to, because it would have expanded it too much, and you can't compare one title on AR and a different title on VR.
Yeah.
So.
But I would argue, if I can kind of like see where this is going, I wouldn't see why, to some extent, some of the interactions, some of the findings that are found in VR couldn't then be applied to an AR design, right? Of course, especially if you're talking about headset-based, right? Because if you're talking about mobile-based, then it's a different story, of course, because the kind of like UI and interactions with the content, it's certainly different. But I certainly see a lot of that, like kind of like that knowledge being cross-functional for AR and VR for sure.
Yes, a lot of it will be, and it'll be up to the reader, so to speak, to make that translation, because VR and AR are not the same, but they have a lot of similarities.
Of course.
And then ideally, I would love to, at the end of this study, we've talked about a number of different things we could do next, like usability studies. And another thing we've talked about is doing like a mixed reality study. And, maybe when there's some level of ubiquity in AR headsets, we could do that. Yeah.
So again, I go free flowing with the questions from the people, right? That's what we want. So there is a question that is from Meng Li. She's a PhD at TU Delft in design. She also works heavily in XR. I might say because I know her. But do you have any publications about this protocol to share? Because that's the point. One thing is getting the study out, and one thing is getting the method. What's your plan for the method itself?
Rob?
The method up to now has gone through lots of revision, almost a year's worth of revision, going through and actually using it with our team to make sure that it's not only usable from an evaluator perspective, and we need to practice what we preach and make sure that our survey is as usable as the titles that we're trying to evaluate, but also just functional and really valid and accurate in terms of data reliability, consistency, repeatability. So up until now, we've been in the development phase. It's really not ready for release. After our initial period of evaluation, then we'll definitely look at publishing a methods paper or to some other venue with that methodology alone, because as Susan mentioned before, the output of the framework itself and the evaluation is almost equally as valuable as the actual evaluations of titles.
Yeah, I think so. We really put a lot of hours into building that framework. So I definitely think that it will be valuable for others to use as well.
Yeah, and this brings me very well to the next questions, and that is like a massive challenge I can imagine, especially since you're dealing with, I believe, 72 titles, so many categories of use cases, right? How do you make, and so many people evaluating this? So the other question is, how do you make sure that the data are reproducible?
So just, I think, so that's been everything, right? That's been all the work is, and not just reproducible, but consistent in terms of what we're collecting, because we have people from so many different backgrounds on the team and we're spread around the world. That's been a major, there you go. And we're missing a few people too. We have Andres in Peru, we have Leo Crisia in Spain, we have Craig somewhere over in Asia, I don't remember.
Singapore.
So apologies for missing a few people here. But yeah, we have people all over the world in many different time zones. So so much of our work has been about how do we make sure that everybody has the same context for answering the questions, because there's a lot of room for interpretation in some of these qualitative questions. And so one of the things we did so one thing I want to say is that we've been testing the test along the way. We've gone through already several iterations of going through the whole process and then improving from there. And that's part of the reason that the team evolved, because as we tested and learned things, we realized, that we needed to build personas, that we needed to build test cases for each title. And so all of these things is what made the team grow. And when we were building the framework for the questions, there was a great deal of discussion around what to include, what not to include, how to word it, what exactly does it mean, how the test is structured, because there's so much variety in VR. It's very difficult to just have like one set of questions fit everything. So we had to really come up with a way to be able to ask questions dynamically where people could iterate in loops to give multiple examples of interaction patterns, for instance.
Can you give us an example? Because like this, it feels like a bit like, I get what you mean, but not really. Can you give us an example of a question that maybe you say, okay, this was tricky, so we decided to phrase it like this because of this reason?
Okay, well, I guess the biggest one is just in terms of interaction patterns. Mm-hmm. So most or many VR experiences have multiple interaction patterns, or they have, so one might use, trying to think of an example of an actual VR title, where
something like Vacation Simulator.
Okay. Vacation Simulator has a lot of places, but I think that so it has a primary interaction pattern, but then you can interact with all these different things in different ways. And so how do you capture all of that variety? So one of the test questions is, how many of these different interaction patterns does this title contain? And you can kind of click off the box of multiple different categorizations that we have. And then the questions that come after that, all the detailed questions, asking about the quality and the feel of that particular interaction pattern, it gets looped for each of the ones that you select.
Yeah.
And that Rob can talk a little bit about that. It was one thing for us to design all these complicated loops, but then when it came time to actually develop the test, we really were using Qualtrics, and we really pushed the limit of what it could actually do. And I don't know if you want to talk a little bit about that, Rob.
Yeah, sure. So definitely one of the challenges was creating a system that was dynamic enough, and Qualtrics appeared later on in the picture. We were initially trying to use just regular Google surveys. So we found a severe limitation with Google surveys where we couldn't do any of that kind of dynamic looping to the extent that we needed. And we looked to a larger platform, which Qualtrics was at that point. So in terms of the dynamic questions, it's gotten to the point where we have over 400 potential questions, and they're all grouped in a branching logic structure so that they only appear when necessary based on answers to previous questions. So this is all part of the usability aspect of the test, as well as the quality of the data. So it's easier for our evaluators when they don't have to see all of the questions that they're not going to answer.
Yeah, I can imagine people giving up just looking at the survey. Nah.
Oh,
Exactly.
no.
Yeah.
So in the past few months has really been all about getting the team up to speed and trained on the questions on the survey, because as I was saying, we spent so much time deliberating on exactly how, what questions we were going to ask and how we were going to ask it. Because again, remember, I don't know, Rob, if you want to pull up the Miro board, we did a lot of secondary research, and it's about 6 of us on the team went on and did secondary research, and we took all of our research and made a mind map in Miro board, and then we took all of that research and we recombined it using, I can't think of the UX term. It'll come back to me. So we reorganized it and recategorized it and brought this all together and synthesized it. So in that process, there was a lot of debate. And there was a lot of very particular definitions that we agreed on. And so making sure that everybody on the team understands what's intended by the way a certain question is asked has been really important. And so we've done quite a bit of training and walking through the test together in our pods to make sure that people really understood the question the same way. So when they're asking it, they're at least they might not agree, but at least they're coming from the same context. And so that's been something that's been a big concern of ours, to make sure that we get good, consistent data.
Yeah.
And then the other thing too is we tried to have a lot of quantitative data where people are making selections, and so we're not relying on trying to analyze a lot of qualitative data. The qualitative data is more to sort of back up the quantitative.
So there is a question from Nate. I do have one question before, because it's really connected to this, and that is when you mention about reproducibility of this test, right? So you mentioned that you have tested the test on yourself, right? It's right. So what was a measure of reproducibility for you? Was that the different person would answer to those questions in the same way? Is that what was reproduce? When is that you say yes? Now we are happy with the reproducibility of our test.
Yeah, in terms of the data itself, obviously a lot of the experience is subjective. So there are instances where there just can't be reproducibility, but there's the quantitative side and the catalog/categorization side, which absolutely should be reproducible.
Yeah, okay.
So that's the aim, is to make sure that those aspects are not only reliably reproducible by our own evaluators, but also if we handed this off or introduced the method into the wild, you could then reproduce it that way outside as well.
Makes sense.
And then that's why also we've spent so much time building the companion document. So the companion document has a very explicit description of what's intended in the question so that there's a common understanding. And so we'll publish that as well as the framework.
Yeah, and this connects with the question from Nate, I think, to some extent. So are these definitions formalized and documented somewhere?
Yes.
And that is the companion document. And I think I'm gonna ask the question, and can people get it before the public? So if I understand correctly, before the study will be finished, but not now, but shortly, kind of, correct?
In the vaguest way.
Not really.
Yes,
I didn't get it properly.
At some point.
Okay.
It is all public information. That's the thing. Like, this is all definitions that we've sourced from other places.
Cool.
So
yeah, we're not making up new terms.
No. Yeah, but of course, I
Yeah.
can imagine that it's massive also amount of work, and having like a handy PDF with all these definitions and stuff is absolutely also great value. So, and I mean, I think this could be maybe interesting for maybe people are gonna be here, certainly gonna be informed when that's gonna come and that's gonna be available. So another extra reason for joining. I do.
So now, Gabriella, now is probably a good time to let people know if they're interested in following us to, follow us on Twitter and LinkedIn. And that would be the best way to know as we're progressing and when these resources are going to be made available.
Yes. So what we can do is that maybe that's great. And I believe that the people joining might also will get an email with then those specific link. I think it might be great,
Sure.
right? So that they will be able to get the recording in case they miss it, and anyway get also access to the Twitter and LinkedIn to stay connected. And of course, I believe that none of you is gonna decline contact requests on LinkedIn or any other from the.
Oh no, of course not.
So absolutely, do it, stay updated, and actually we at Vori, we are gonna keep you updated because we are one of the first to be tested. So we also like very passionate about this. So we couldn't not be in the study, of course. So yes, we are gonna be the first to show what's the outcome, what people are gonna get when are gonna be basically like content contributors telling a bit about what were the findings. Really looking forward to it. We do have another question from Meg. Could you tell what means immersive design in your study? Design of product, design of services, design of exhibition, design of art? That's get a bit broad, right? What is it?
So I can take that question, Rob, since it's kind of like my thing. The study is definitely specifically on VR. And the reason I wanted to have a little bit more of a broad term is because, as you were alluding to earlier, that the learnings can be applied to augmented reality or mixed reality. And so that's why we are using sort of a little bit more generic term. And I know immersive media is, can be theater, right? It can be so many different things, but we're meaning it to be immersive, like headset immersive.
Yeah, clear.
Yeah.
Then I do have one more questions because we mentioned about these different aspects and complexity in managing the people, managing who's going to do the study, the hardware, so the categorization, reproducibility. So, but if you would think about what were at the end the three major challenges that you have encountered and how you have solved them. So we had these. Out of all the things that you were facing, it's like, oh my God, this is so hard. What were the three biggest, and how you managed to solve them so far?
So I think so I think that there's finding the right people that are a good fit for the team. So because we're looking for a variety of people, we have we have brought in people at different like levels because we think that they have a particular perspective that's useful for the team. But just the ongoing recruiting has been quite a lot of work because of the nature of the commitment. It's so long. And people come on board because they're really excited, and then they realize it's really not going to work in their schedules, and we understand that. And because we've been so rigorous on testing the test and not launching until we're really confident that we have all of our ducks in a row, there's been some delays, and that's been difficult for some people's schedules. So just keeping everybody interested over such a long period of time has been a challenge for us. And one of the ways we've solved that is we invite everyone to participate in the building of the test, but it's not required. So we have people on the team that are just like, no, I want to look at the titles, but I don't want to do any additional work. And there's other people, I'm really excited about this, and I want to contribute in any way I can. So keeping that balance and keeping those people that are less interested in building the test and just want to do the test, keeping them engaged and keeping them interested, that's been a really big challenge.
And Rob, what about, we are talking about, so Susan told us one, what about Rob? What was, from your perception, one of the biggest challenges?
Yeah, I guess I've got a few of the technical challenges that we've faced, and they revolve around the systems that we're using. But I mean, some of that stems from the fact that we're a group of volunteers, so we don't have any financial backing. There's no university funding attached to this. There's no sponsorship of any sort. The content contribution is the main pathway that we can trade value with developers and producers and creators. In terms of the limitation that that's put on us, we really do find creative solutions to some of these technical challenges. So being able to create a dynamic survey, we can only do that through customizing existing software. So as we mentioned before, Qualtrics, so we've done all this customization. That's ended up with us writing custom JavaScript and CSS code to make it look and feel the way that we want it to, so it is usable for our evaluators. We've put in navigation bars into a survey, which seems kind of crazy, but that's the level of complexity that we're operating at. So we need to show the evaluators where they're up to in the test, so it's really clear to them. They know how much is to come. They know which sections relate to which other sections, how the sections are looping, as Susan mentioned before. So there's definitely that side of it. There's the data management side, so the pure amount of data that we're getting. With everyone recording their screens at a consistent resolution, we end up with hundreds of gigabytes of files that we're trying to manage on our shared servers that we can then share between our analysts who are pulling their own screenshots and generating individual instances of these patterns that exist within the virtual experiences. So just from a data perspective, that's taken a lot of extra work and management from a purely dedicated data team that has spun up inside the group. I think those are probably my biggest challenges are the technical side.
That sounds like
managing the people.
That really sounds like.
But I think also that a lot of those challenges, and one of the ways we've tried to keep people engaged is by, excuse me, let me let my dog out or he's going to keep barking. So one of the ways that we've kept people engaged is to try and find opportunities for them to contribute in a meaningful way and to provide leadership positions for people that want that kind of training. And so I hope and believe that that's one of the things that keeps some of the people that are more engaged is that we're all learning from each other. We have a really great team of vibrant, excited, passionate people, and we're all learning so much from each other. And so providing those opportunities for leadership, like managing the data team or managing the internal website has, I think, kept a lot of people excited and interested in the project.
Because everybody could kind of like find his own niche and something that he could contribute and was motivated to do, of course.
Yeah.
We do have a question from Simon. It says, how do you categorize design patterns in terms of multimodal input, like voice recognition, eye tracking, hand tracking, controller, and multisensory feedback, haptic, audio, visual UI pattern, etc. So how do you categorize this different design pattern when it's multimodal input?
Yeah, that's a great question. We thought about that a lot as part of initially the UI taxonomy, and then that translated into how we ask those questions. And it really comes down to providing the maximum number of potential answers to the evaluators so that they can pick and choose the ones that are appropriate. So for all those examples that you just listed, all of those are possible answers that they can select under a specific interaction pattern or under a specific interface. And that allows us to see in multiple places throughout an experience where these different types of feedback or input could be present.
Okay, so basically it's kind of like giving all the opportunities to not miss anything. Kind of. Okay.
That's certainly our intention. So for example, if you pick a particular interaction pattern that uses some kind of a raycast or selection, and then some kind of a button press as a commitment, like you're committing, then there's a series of questions that follow that ask about, is there haptic feedback? Is there any kind of like auditory or visual signifiers, right? So it goes through a whole set of questions that captures all of that stuff. And then we actually have another section of the test that talks about sensory input that's not related to interaction patterns. So we go through a whole series of questions on visual, haptic, and auditory sensory stimuli, like of the avatar or in the environment, separate from interactions. So.
Okay. So massive again. So Simon, I think this is a good answer. You got that impression. One question that I had, because I think we haven't talked about, is those categories, right? You mentioned that you have decided to group 12, not to group, to have 72 titles split across 12 use case categories, right? Mm-hmm. So what are those categories? How do you pick them? And why? Right? I mean, you could say, okay, we want to pick, 10 games, or maybe how was the logic behind picking those categories? Maybe also to help some of the people that are here to kind of like understand what kind of titles are you guys interested in, right? Because that might also be pretty helpful.
Do we have a list that's easily displayed? No? Okay.
We don't have a slide, I'm afraid.
But you want to talk about the origin of that, like where we started?
Yeah, so the original source for our categories, and I mean the decision behind these use cases and categories, was that we would have representative categories or use cases that were separate from industry verticals. I think we often see industry verticals being used as this categorization technique, which is appropriate for an enterprise market, but not so appropriate for a consumer market, or there's too much overlap between them. Like a tool could fit into both industry verticals for, say, car manufacturing just as much as it could for art and creative design.
Yeah, and Rob, I'm just pulled up now a slide just for myself so that you would maybe let me share my screen so that everybody sees it properly. Yeah. No, you don't see that there now, guys. People don't see it.
Okay.
No, you guys see it, but people don't. So let me just put it here. Now people can see it. You can't, guys, but it's social and communication, asymmetric experience, health and well-being, destination and travel, entertainment games, entertainment narrative, education and learning, sales and marketing, data visualization, design and production, workforce collaboration, training, and skill retention. So those were the 12 categories that you guys, at least in the version that I have, I don't know if there has been slight changes, but nonetheless, these are supposed would give a good impression of what are you guys looking at, right?
Yeah, it's slightly outdated now. We've made a couple of revisions based on where titles are heading these days, but yeah, to come back to the point of where they came from, where those categories came from, we had the idea that we were going to focus on use cases, how someone could specifically apply the technology to their personal use. And then we got the original source from a VR intelligence report that came out in 2017, 2018. It's an annual report that has kept coming out now. But at the point where we were starting to look at doing this research, we analyzed those and said, which of these will have enough titles in them that we can actually analyze them and compare them between each other, and which are focused enough that that category by itself will make sense and stand alone. So that's what led to those categories. There's a balance between consumer facing titles and then the more enterprise titles, and all of that contributes to the research as well. So we really want to be able to use that as a dimension to explore the design patterns or the findings that we get, and say between something like education, like a formal student-based education title, and then something more like a lifelong learning, informal learning title, are there similarities or big differences between the interaction patterns that the creators are using?
Yeah, so because there are going to be indeed 6 titles per use case. So that means that you are then also going to be able to not only look at that one or across all of them, but also within the category and try to draw conclusion and like similarity, differences, and so on. Fantastic.
Yeah, exactly.
So, Nate, there is another question from Nathaniel. Is there some testing being done with users that have accessibility considerations, like color blindness? Yes, we have a result.
Thank you for bringing that up, because it's like, absolutely there is.
Yeah.
Everything that we've been talking about is the core study. But after we did our one of our iterations, we said, we really should be looking at accessibility. How are we going to include that in the study? And so we brought on an accessibility consultant, Thomas Logan from Equal Entry. And so he's working with us as a consultant, and he's got our people from our team, but he's got a team of people working in the accessibility space. Also Regine Gilbert, who's well known in the space for accessibility. And I can't think of Lisa's last name. What is Lisa's last name? What is it?
Aguilar.
Oh, Aguilar, yeah, Lisa Aguilar, thank you. So other people too, Andreas and Marge are working in the accessibility team. And so what they're going to do is, based on the data, and they're in the process right now of tagging the questions that are relevant for accessibility, like can you control the distance, or can you control the text size? So if that question is related to accessibility, they're going to tag that, and then at the end of each test, we're going to have a data dump of the accessibility question, specifically like an accessibility report that the accessibility team will review and determine, is this a good title? Do we feel this is a good title to do usability tests on with people of varying disabilities? And so Thomas is heading that up, and we would like to do, I think we talked about around 6 to 9 usability studies along the way. And I think Thomas had a really good point of, it's very early on in the industry. Let's not bash titles that aren't thinking about accessibility. Let's focus on the ones that are doing a good job and thinking about it. And let's really highlight those. And so that's why they're going to be looking at the data to determine which ones they think are the best use case for doing usability studies.
Yeah, so it's basically you're going to use the first big study to filter out what's relevant then to be tested again under those, let's say, usability condition, under those, let's say, limitation. Accessibility, yeah. Accessibility.
Yeah, but we hope to do that along the way. I don't think we're planning like waiting until the very end, because after each test, we'll be able to look at the data, and that team will be able to decide, is this a good, let's do our first usability study. So definitely put a lot of thought into that.
So we have Songji Kim says, "Hi Susan and Rob, I've joined from
Hi,
Seoul."
he's on our team. I was going to say he's on the team.
He is saying hi. And there is also another question from Meng. She asked, "I'm working on a VR-based surgical training project. How would you categorize it? Because it's a surgical training. So would that be what category of the 12 would you say?"
Yeah, this is a discussion that we have to have every time with every title to understand where it fits. So we can walk you through what that discussion would look like right now. Training and knowledge retention is its own category, and then obviously health is its own category as well. We made a clear distinction that health should be for more the consumer market, for people, health and well-being use cases. So when you want to improve your own health through the technology, that's quite distinct from a training solution. And so in this case, we'd classify that as one of the training and knowledge retention use cases, because that fits into the enterprise side of the market, and because it's the purpose of that application is about building those skills, about building knowledge within the surgeon, assumedly. So that would be where that would fit in.
And now that I hear, I can just imagine how many hours, how many emails went back and forth with these kind of conversations, like just getting all those and like skipping all the decision process, and it's kind of like, okay, at least this is how the guys at Veilab have done it, right? Do we want to follow that path? At least, it kind of like, I think then people might be willing to categorize things in a different way. But the value of having something that is a framework and you can play around and change with that framework, I think it's absolutely massive. So I think that indeed, just the test itself, just the logic, and I hope, Rob, I mean, this is also part of your PhD. So I think this is going to be compiled in your thesis, or is that right? So is that going to be something just part of Veil, or some of that is also going to come across in your own research?
Yeah, good question. I would like to make that distinction, so thanks for asking. The PhD is definitely separate from the work at Veil. Veil was born out of personal interest and my own desire to be a developer of VR experiences one day. And my PhD research is so narrowly scoped to education specifically that there's not heaps of overlap. But that said, one of the pathways that we offer to our evaluators, especially those in the academic space, is being involved with any publication at the end that results as a derivative of our findings from Veil. So they are separate, and the Veil findings will be published completely standalone, definitely with the affiliation of everyone's universities that are involved, but not under their banners, not under any funding from any of those universities.
Yeah, that's true. Okay.
But that said, I definitely would like to take the education category that we will look at Veil, take the findings from that specific component of the study, and then do further work to say, out of the design patterns we've found, what or which of those design patterns might actually make a difference to learning. Whereas we're looking at how it makes a difference to immersion, user perceptions. We're not going that extra step, following it up with efficacy studies. And that's something that I could then trail on and fit within the scope of my PhD.
So that would work as a building block then to do further research. And interestingly, other people could do the same at that point, right? They could say, okay, we have done this, there is so much interesting, let's dig deeper, because this is indeed just a stepping stone, right? I mean, then at that point, there are so many opportunities.
Yeah. Exactly.
So there is Simon that asked a good question, I think also for the time, since we are getting closer to the end, is like, what's your vision for Veil, with whom you would love to collaborate or partner up to reach faster your goal?
What was the last part? To partner up to go faster?
To reach faster your goal.
Oh, okay. That's a really great question. Because we've been working so like independently and on our own. We haven't talked about too much about like how we would partner up with people. I see this right now, this collaboration with you as a way of I'm hoping as more people know about it and get an interest in it, we'll have people like you that want to share about it.
So I think, in a way, if I can also chip in, I think that it's up to everybody here. Like, I mean, really, I mean it. I'm looking now at the camera because I really mean it. It's up to everybody that is seen here to take our own responsibility to share and make this a success. Because until this will remain some closed study on a website, what's going to happen is that design for XR is still going to be something that is in the hands of developer. And everybody should contribute in the way they want. We at Vori, what we want to do is that we want to give the tools to designers, right? So that's what we want to do, and that's why we need more designers. So that's why here I think it's also a good moment to say, if there are designers in a room, we are opening up our own tool on Quest to basically to allow many more designers to start designing directly in VR for VR. So this is what at Vori we are trying to do. Nonetheless, that doesn't mean that you who are now listening cannot do anything. Oh, what can I do? What can you do? Well, you can share this until you die. I mean, you can just put it on every post-it or on everywhere in general to kind of like show the passion. So I think it's really like to everybody. And in general, the next step also would be to look and recommend to some titles that I think you were mentioning, Susan, when we had a brief chat, was about variety. Right, that was also an important aspects to look at, for example, from the content contributors in terms of kind of like differences that are within those titles. So I didn't mean to take over and to answer the question. It was more a bit like my own take.
No, that's okay. Thank you.
Yeah, so I would only add that if there's any headset manufacturers or platform developers out there, we do have a lot of analysts who are potentially in that role because of limited access to hardware, and that would be a great avenue for partnership that we'd love to explore down the line to get the hardware into the hands of our team who's worked so hard and they've built up their knowledge by not experiencing the titles, by watching our evaluators experiencing them, and then meticulously grabbing screenshots and analyzing the data and poring over all of the insights that are coming out, but then still not getting a chance due to whatever limitation that they have. So that would be one thing that we'd love, but any support from anyone is great, and we're extremely grateful for the opportunity like this to present in front of people or to just have those discussions with people. We're always open to chat and talk more about the research.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
So I have, for example, Nate asking a question, and I think it's very valuable, is that do you have to be an owner, producer of the titles that get recommended?
Yes. So because there's no compensation in this, we're all working as volunteers from our own passion. What we asked of our contributors is they give a key to each of the researcher in that particular pod.
Right.
So it turns out to be between 6 to 8 keys for that particular pod. And so in order to do that, yes, you'd have to have rights to the title. Absolutely.
Unless the title is for free, because there is also...
Unless the title is for free,
right.
And we will likely have free titles in our study. Absolutely.
Yeah, absolutely. Even because, I mean, to be honest, right now there is so much great content, great titles that are now free in different categories, right? That's not true for all of them, of course. So I think that maybe the enterprise area is, of course, less, let's say, populated in a way with free titles, but in general, that's absolutely true.
But we're definitely looking for content contributors, people who are, passionate about the same goals that we have and want to be a part of this study. We're definitely actively pursuing content creators and producers. If you want to be a part of the study, please go to our LinkedIn page or our website to apply to become a contributor.
Yeah. So indeed, the last call to action would be to basically to everybody to maybe post about what is that you guys are actually doing, and then indeed, ask for guys. They are looking for content contributors. There is a massive amount of work that's being done. So indeed, just go to on Twitter or on LinkedIn, go to their website, and then share basically what Susan, Rob, and the amazing team of behind them, right? That is basically like building this all over the world to just share and invite people to contribute with their titles. And that means what they're gonna get. Well, they're gonna get this great detailed report, basically like updates with all the methods that has been followed, certainly to analyze their study. And then of course, just I would say, as we are certainly just very like glad to support such a mission, and in general be part of what I really believe is actually design history for VR.
Oh, thank you.
Absolutely. So guys, do you have one last remark before we close it? Do you want to say something to the we've got like around 40 people constantly throughout the whole event, so there's absolutely like great response, a lot of great questions. Do you want to add anything?
Yeah, I just want to give a shout out to the team. I wish I could, list every single name, but we have about 32 people, and we're just so appreciative of the passion and hard work that people are putting in, and really hope that they're getting that, an equal amount of value out of it, because we have a team of some pretty amazing people.
Yeah, and I would just add thanks everyone for the interest, for joining us today. Our mission is around creating this shared language and really expanding the design patterns that we can use within immersive and VR experiences. So please do your own research as well. Keep adding to that conversation and the dialogue that's out there, because you never know, we could be drawing from your research or your background or your blog post and including that in the study as well.
Absolutely. So thank you very much, Rob, Susan. Thank you very much for everybody that joined. And of course, let's keep talking. Stay tuned, because here at Tvori we like always to talk with great professionals about UX design and VR and AR. And we have an amazing release also lined up by the end of April with our version of Tvori on Quest. So please join the beta test if you haven't. And otherwise, we're going to certainly see you around. Bye, Susan. Bye, Rob. It was a real pleasure.
Bye-bye. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabrielle.
Bye.
Pleasure.